A kind pregnant housewife saw her husband dining with his mistress. The next day, their business was under federal investigation. They say the worst heartbreaks don't come with warning signs. No shouting, no slammed doors, just silence, and a woman holding a warm lunch in a cold world. Clara Evans was the kind of woman people admired from afar. Graceful, kind, the type who remembered birthdays, who baked for the neighbors during the holidays, who stayed out of the spotlight while building an empire with her husband. To Atlanta's high society, she was elegance without arrogance. The quiet strength behind James Evans, CEO of Evans Global Freight. Before we go further, please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories like this one. But that morning, Clara wasn't thinking about the headlines. She wasn't thinking about profits or prestige. She was thinking about her husband, about how tired he looked last night, about how he hadn't touched his dinner, about the baby kicking earlier than usual. So she decided to surprise him, to bring him his favorite lunch, just like she used to when the company was still run out of their garage. In the kitchen, the early sunlight spilled across the countertops as Clara, 7 months pregnant, moved with intention. She seasoned the chicken just right, paired it with jasmine rice, tucked in a slice of key lime pie, and gently folded a note. "You're working too hard. Let me spoil you for once. Love, see." Her handwriting trembled just slightly, though she didn't know why. Every item she packed was chosen with love. A bottle of ginger lemonade, the exact kind he liked. A protein bar for his late meetings. Even a silver fork from their wedding set, because she knew he always forgot utensils when he ordered takeout at the office. She glanced at the clock. 11:42 a.m. Still time to catch him before his usual Thursday meeting. She glanced up at a framed photograph on the wall. It was taken 3 years ago at the governor's ball. Clara in navy blue silk, James in a black tuxedo, both smiling wide. He had called her his greatest investment during his toast that night, and everyone laughed. She did too. Now, she simply stared at the photo, searching it for something she couldn't name. She gently placed the basket on the counter and paused, one hand on her belly, the other bracing the marble edge. A long exhale left her lips, the kind you take when you're not sure why you're nervous. But she smiled anyway. "Let's go see Daddy," she whispered to the baby. "He's going to love this." Outside, spring in Atlanta was alive with birdsong and sunlight. The driveway was warm beneath her feet as she loaded the basket into her car. She adjusted the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of herself, glowing, expectant, happy, or trying to be. She didn't see the unraveling. Not then. She didn't know what her husband was doing across town. Didn't know who he was with. Didn't know what was already broken. In her heart, she was just a wife, a woman in love, bringing lunch to the man she trusted most in the world. And that's the tragedy of it. How easily love becomes a lie. How ordinary mornings lead to extraordinary pain. She pulled out of the driveway, humming quietly, unaware that nothing about the day would end the way it began. Because sometimes the first crack in a perfect life is the one no one else hears but you. And by the time it echoes, everything's already changed. Sometimes the heart breaks before the mind can make sense of it. It doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures in silence, in stillness, in the unspoken moments where truth meets the eyes and leaves the mouth frozen. Clara Evans had no reason to expect betrayal that day. She had followed love into downtown Atlanta with a lunch tray and a hopeful smile. Delilah's was the kind of place James liked to impress clients. White tablecloths, polished silverware, discreet waitstaff. She had never once walked in unannounced. But today, something had told her to go. A quiet nudge. A good pull. Or maybe it was just instinct. The kind women learn to trust too late. The valet opened the door and wished her a good afternoon. She nodded kindly, her hand pressed against her stomach, balancing the basket in her other arm. She was early. He wouldn't expect her yet. Maybe that was the point. She imagined his surprise, the way he'd smile and thank her, maybe even invite her to join him for once. But as she stepped inside the restaurant, the warmth she carried with her met a wall of chilled air and colder truth. She didn't need to scan the room. Her eyes found him before her mind could prepare. There, in a dimly lit corner booth, was James. Her husband, her partner, her world, laughing, leaning in close to a woman half his age, her long fingers tracing the rim of a wine glass. James wasn't discussing contracts. He wasn't pitching a deal. He was present, engaged, smiling in a way Clara hadn't seen in months. His hand rested on the woman's wrist, casually, familiarly, intimately. The basket in Clara's hand grew heavy. The air thickened, and in that instant, something inside her stopped moving. She didn't make a sound. No gasp. No footsteps retreating. She simply stood there, frozen between two lives. The one she thought she had, and the one now unfolding before her eyes. He never saw her. Or maybe he did and chose not to react. She wasn't sure which possibility hurt more. Her fingers, once steady, began to tremble. Not out of anger, but disbelief. The kind that feels like vertigo in the center of her chest. She clutched the basket tighter, not out of purpose, but because letting go would mean accepting what she now knew. People walked past her, waiters with trays, executives in conversation. Life moved on while hers stood still. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words arrived. There was nothing to say, nothing to salvage. She turned, walked slowly. Outside, the sky looked exactly as it had when she arrived. Bright, ordinary blue. The tray landed in the trash with a soft thud. Clara didn't look back. Her breath came uneven, and her hand never left her belly. She walked with the grace of someone trying not to fall apart in public. Every step forward felt like a betrayal of what she had once believed. Back in the restaurant, James raised his glass, toasting to something Clara would never know. She drove home in silence. That night, James returned just after 8. Loosened his tie, kissed her cheek, said traffic was a nightmare, asked what was for dinner. And Clara? She smiled, nodded, sat across from him like nothing had changed. But everything had, because sometimes the most dangerous kind of truth is the one you carry alone, the kind that doesn't explode, just waits, and waiting has its own kind of fury. Some betrayals scream, others whisper, but the ones that cut the deepest are discovered in silence. It was just after midnight when Clara Evans opened her eyes. The house lay quiet, wrapped in darkness and denial. The hum of the refrigerator echoed through the walls like a lullaby for the unaware. James had come home hours earlier, acting as though nothing had shifted, as though the foundation beneath their life hadn't cracked. He kissed her forehead, mentioned his meeting, and climbed into bed with the same rhythm he always did. But Clara didn't sleep. She hadn't closed her eyes since she left Delilah's. She lay there, still and staring, while the image of James with another woman replayed endlessly. Not because of what he did, but because of how easily he had done it. So calm, so comfortable, so certain he wouldn't be caught. At 12:17 a.m., she rose. No anger, no noise, just resolve. She moved barefoot across the hallway, past the nursery still under construction, a crib half assembled, a shelf waiting for picture books. Her hand grazed the doorframe, and she paused only briefly before stepping into the one room she was never invited to, James's home office. He always locked the bottom drawer of his desk. Always. It was the one thing in their marriage she'd never asked about, and now it was the only thing she couldn't ignore. She opened the top drawer first, slowly, quietly, just in case. It held nothing unusual. Pens, paper clips, receipts. But the bottom, that was different. A small silver key, once tucked inside a forgotten photo album, now slid into the lock. It turned with a soft click. And just like that, the truth opened wide. Inside the drawer were files. Thick, creased folders with no labels. 2 phones. USB drives sealed in plastic. Clara sat slowly, pulling each item out with steady hands. She didn't know what she expected. Evidence of cheating, perhaps. A love letter. A hotel receipt. But what she found was far worse. The first file detailed offshore accounts. Large transfers made under fabricated shell companies. The bank names were foreign. The totals were obscene. The names of the listed executives? Non-existent. The second file was worse. Invoices. Dozens of them. All marked paid. All for services never rendered. all tied to employees Clara had never met. And she knew every single person on their payroll. She moved on to the USBs. The folder names alone chilled her. Contracts _ fake. Taxes _ cover. Vendor _ story. She didn't open the files. Not yet. She didn't need to. Not to know what they were. Not to understand what James had been hiding all this time. And it wasn't just the affair. This wasn't just about love. This was fraud. The kind that sent people to prison. Her hands began to shake. Not from fear, but from clarity. The man she had built a company with, the father of her unborn child, was living two lives. One with her, and one without rules. She pulled out her phone, thumb trembling as she took pictures. Every document. Every screen. Every file. One after another. This wasn't just for her. This was evidence. She worked quickly, ears tuned to the ceiling. Every creak of the house. Every shift of the wind. And then, something upstairs. A rustle. A groan of a mattress spring. She froze, then slowly closed the drawer, locking it again as carefully as she had opened it. She stepped out of the office without looking back. But in the hallway, she paused, her hand resting on her stomach. She wasn't just carrying a child now. She was carrying the weight of everything she knew. And James? He was still asleep, still unaware. But not for long. There comes a moment in every woman's life when silence becomes betrayal, not just of herself, but of everything she swore to protect. That morning, Clara Evans didn't cry. She didn't pace. She didn't second-guess. She folded the documents with trembling but determined fingers and slid them into a plain manila envelope. No labels, no hesitation, just truth. Stacked, stapled, and suffocating. Outside, Atlanta was already humming. Office towers caught the early light, suits rushed coffee orders, and midtown traffic moved like any other Thursday. But Clara's world wasn't ordinary anymore. She walked through the glass doors of a downtown law firm like a woman walking into war. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with purpose. Mrs. Randy Cole, an experienced attorney known for her discretion, sat across the table reviewing the paperwork. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed but patient, Clara watched her face change slowly as she read. Page after page, number after number. It didn't take long before the weight of what she held in her hands settled in the room like fog. These accounts, Randy said softly, tapping the edge of a transfer slip. They're traced offshore. In his name, your name, and 2 aliases. Clara didn't flinch. I didn't know, she said, voice steady. But now I do. And I won't be silent. Randy's gaze held hers for a long moment. You understand this implicates your husband, and potentially you, if it's proven these assets were sheltered during your joint filings. I have nothing to hide, Clara interrupted, and my daughter will not be born into a lie. That line hung in the air, stronger than any legal clause. Clara wasn't just turning in evidence. She was drawing a line in permanent ink, between right and wrong. Between survival and surrender. Randy finally nodded. I'll make the calls. Silence followed. No small talk. No comfort. Clara looked down at her hands. They didn't feel like hers anymore. They had signed marriage documents, company contracts, birth plans. And now, they were delivering the one thing that could destroy it all. James's illusion of control. A faint buzz came from Randy's phone. She picked it up, responded quickly, then stood. I'll forward this directly to the IRS and the Georgia Department of Revenue. Discreetly. They'll move faster than you think. Clara rose too, her back straighter, shoulders higher. It wasn't courage that got her there. It was something deeper. Conviction shaped by betrayal. Love that had nowhere left to go but forward. As she stepped out of the building, the sunlight hit hard, sharp off the pavement. The noise of the city returned. Car horns, bus brakes, laughter from a group of interns crossing the street. Life went on, but Clara didn't move with the same rhythm anymore. Each step felt heavier, but for the first time, she wasn't walking in someone else's shadow. She was becoming something else entirely. She paused at the corner, her hand briefly touching her belly. A quiet vow passed between mother and child. You will be born into truth, even if it costs me everything. Behind her, in a secure line and an encrypted inbox, agents began receiving documents that would shake the foundation of Evans Global Freight. But Clara didn't look back. She didn't need to, because once you expose the truth, you no longer belong to the past. And what waited in that past wasn't done unraveling. Power doesn't vanish in silence. It falls in front of everyone, loud, messy, and impossible to ignore. 48 hours had passed since Clara Evans walked out of that law office, her hands empty, but her conscience full. And now, the city of Atlanta wasn't whispering anymore. It was watching. Every screen, every station, every voice that once praised the empire she and James built had shifted to shock, to judgment, to outrage. Peachtree Street, the financial artery of downtown, was gridlocked, not with traffic, but with news vans, federal vehicles, and office workers clustered along sidewalks, their phones held high like shields against disbelief. Reporters shouted over one another, broadcasting live updates, while sirens wailed in the background. James Evans, once the face of Evans Global Freight, was being led out of his own building in handcuffs. His tailored suit hung crooked, collar wilted. His expression, unreadable. He didn't shout. He didn't resist. He just walked, flanked by agents, past employees who could barely speak. Some wept. Some stared. Some turned their backs. They had trusted him, believed in him, built their careers beneath his name. And now, they were collateral damage in a scandal none of them saw coming. Evans Global Freight under federal investigation for tax evasion, wire fraud, and the use of multiple shell corporations, one anchor reported. Sources say whistleblower documentation was delivered directly to federal authorities 2 days ago. Clara sat alone on the living room sofa, the television light flickering across her face. Her hands lay still in her lap, her eyes fixed but distant. She didn't cry. Not yet. She'd already cried. In kitchens, in cars, in silence. And now she was simply processing. The man on screen was the same man who once kissed her knuckles in church pews, who promised to build an empire for their family. And now, he was being paraded through flashing bulbs like a common thief. And in a way, he hadn't just stolen from the government. He had stolen her trust, their future, her peace. The television droned on. Words like embezzlement, federal indictment, and immediate asset freeze blurred into one another. Then her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen. The name read, Board of Directors. The very board she and James had selected together. The same board that, until yesterday, had pretended everything was fine. She answered, her voice low but steady. We need leadership. Temporarily. Just until we can. Stabilize the company, the voice said on the other end. Clara didn't respond right away. She looked around the house. The couch they'd picked out. The framed awards lining the hallway. The empty nursery just a room away. Her mind drifted, not to the scandal, but to her daughter. The life growing inside her. The life she had to protect. She closed her eyes, then answered. Let's talk tomorrow. She ended the call, and for the first time in days, she exhaled. A single tear slid down her cheek. Not out of regret, but release. She had made her choice. She had watched the house of cards fall. But what comes after the collapse is something else entirely. The city continued buzzing outside. The news kept reporting. The calls kept coming. But Clara sat still, her silence louder than any headline. Because while James was being led away, she was being called towards something else. And somewhere deep in her bones, she knew, this wasn't the end. Not even close. There are moments when the world stops pretending, when a veil is lifted, when power is stripped bare, and only truth is allowed to speak. 2 months had passed since the arrest. The headlines had flared, the financial empire had crumbled, and the public had devoured every second of the fall. But now, in Fulton County Courthouse, the noise fell silent. All that remained was testimony. James Evans sat at the defense table. Thinner, paler, smaller than the man Atlanta once called a business genius. His once confident stare had dulled into something hollow. No custom suit could mask the exhaustion in his posture. His lawyer whispered, shuffled papers, but the room already knew what was coming. Across the aisle, Clara sat straight, poised. No dice arme. No bitterness. Just truth resting in her voice like a blade. Sharp, clean, deliberate. When she rose to speak, no one breathed. She didn't tremble. She didn't falter. She told them about the documents, the lies, the years of fabricated numbers and hidden accounts. But she also spoke of the silence. The dinners where James smiled like nothing was wrong. The nights she went to bed with a stranger she thought she knew. She spoke for 12 minutes. And in 12 minutes, the story changed. No longer was this just a financial scandal. It was betrayal in every form. Not just of shareholders, but of a wife, a child, a city that had once believed in him. The prosecution followed swiftly. USBs, ledger sheets, testimony from former employees. It was all there, handed over by the woman who had once shared his bed, his name, and his future. The defense tried to cast out, called it a misunderstanding, said Clara was confused, emotional, misled. But no one believed that anymore. By the third day, the media had coined a title that stuck, the reluctant whistleblower. It was meant to be catchy, but for Clara, it wasn't quite right. She hadn't wanted any of this, but she had chosen it. And there's a difference. On the final day, as the jury returned, the courtroom waited. 6 counts. Guilty, 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 guilty. The words came like waves. Calm, but devastating. James didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, hands clenched. The same hands that once held hers at board meetings, at baby appointments, and hospital waiting rooms. Now, he sat alone. Clara stood. She gathered her bag with quiet precision. The reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, their questions waiting like coiled springs. Flashes, shouts, microphones. One voice rose above the rest. Mrs. Evans, do you feel vindicated? She paused only for breath, then spoke. My child will grow up in truth, she said. Not luxury, bought with lies. And then she kept walking. No podium, no rehearsed speech, no victory pose. Because this wasn't victory. It was justice. But justice has its price. Behind her, the courthouse doors closed, sealing away the chapter that had nearly destroyed her. Ahead, the world waited. Not with answers, but with questions. Whispers. Possibilities. The noise behind her faded. But inside her, something new had begun to stir. Not relief, not pride. Something quieter. Something unspoken. Because while the courtroom had heard her truth, she knew the hardest part wasn't telling it. It was living with it. And somewhere in the silence, something else was about to begin. Healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself. It tiptoes in piece by piece. Until one day, you realize you're no longer surviving. You're living. 6 months had passed since the trial. The dust had settled, at least on the outside. Headlines had faded. The city had moved on. But for Clara Evans, this chapter wasn't about what was over. It was about what had just begun. East Atlanta, far from the glass towers of Peachtree Street, now held the quiet heartbeat of Clara's second life. The office wasn't grand. No sweeping skyline views, no corporate marble. But it was hers. Honest. Earned. The hand-painted sign above the door read, Evans Integrity Consulting, a name she chose carefully. A name that told a different story than the one her past had tried to write. Inside, the space was warm. Sunlight spilled across the wooden desk where Clara stood, a baby balanced on her hip, her free hand signing papers with confidence. Her daughter cooed softly, fingers curled around her mother's necklace. The one James had given her on their 5th anniversary, now stripped of meaning but not memory. The client across from her, a representative from a nonprofit supporting abused women, beamed with gratitude. Your story, it helped us get funding. It gave us leverage to demand oversight. You didn't just expose a man, Clara. You changed the standard. Clara nodded, humbled, but her smile didn't linger on praise. It rested on her child's cheek, soft and round, untouched by the weight of betrayal. On the far wall, where once hung framed magazine covers and shareholder awards, now lived photographs. Clara swaddling her newborn, Clara walking barefoot in the garden with her daughter in her arms, Clara laughing mid-blink. Life captured emotion. Real, raw, redeemed. A TV murmured in the background. A news anchor reported updates on corporate accountability measures passed in Georgia, legislation that stemmed directly from the Evans investigation. The words were heavy, but Clara's eyes didn't flinch. She reached for the remote and turned it off. Enough of the past, she whispered. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of new beginnings, of quiet victories, of things that didn't need to be broadcast to matter. She walked her client to the door, thanked her, and paused at the threshold. Outside, the street bustled. Students walked past with coffee cups. A bike courier zipped by, and across the road, a small bookstore displayed a handwritten sign. "Welcome to the chapters we haven't read yet." Clara held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of baby powder and fresh hope. She didn't think of James. Not in anger, not in regret. He was part of the story, yes, but not the ending. She returned to her desk, where more papers waited, more plans, more dreams. Her phone buzzed once. A name flashed across the screen. She stared for a moment, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in preparation. Because no matter how far you've come, the past doesn't always stay behind you. Sometimes it knocks, and what you do next defines everything. Please ensure to like, share, and subscribe for heartwarming stories like this. Likewise, tell us where you are watching from in the comment section.